Good evening. I'd like to call the City of LaPorte Common Council meeting to order for October 19th. It is 6 p.m. I'd like to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilman Frank.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We appreciate the public support of moving this meeting from in person to in Zoom due to just more COVID precaution. And Attorney Nick Otis will be monitoring all questions throughout, and we'll try to be flexible to answer questions as we move through the agenda. So with that, roll call by Clerk Treasurer Parthun.
Councilman Frankie.
Present.
Councilman Vincent. Here. Councilwoman Brown.
Here.
Councilwoman Ficus. Sorry.
Present.
Councilwoman West.
Here.
Councilman Galloway.
Here.
Councilwoman Cutler.
Present.
All present.
Approval of minutes. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Petitions and comments of citizens. Again, we will be flexible and work with the public. Please, I guess, message your questions and we'll try to answer those before the end of the meeting. Currently, we do not have any. Standing committee reports. Councilwoman Cutler.
You did, yes. The Business Improvement District Board met via Zoom this month, and contracts were approved for both the fall leaf pickup and winter snow removal within the bid. Also on the agenda was the tree lighting and wreath installations for the downtown, including estimates for costs for repairs and replacements of current decorations. But after much discussion, the board unanimously agreed to not allocate the funds this year for repairs for the old equipment in anticipation of working with this new city planner in an all-new Christmas lighting design for next year. And the Urban Enterprise Board will meet via Zoom this Wednesday, October 21st at 4 p.m. That's it.
Thank you. And sorry, I went out of order. I went by who I picked first on Zoom, but I'll get back. Councilwoman Brown.
Have nothing to report.
Councilwoman Ficus.
The only thing I have to report is that Park Board will be meeting this Wednesday, 4 p.m. at the Park Hall.
Councilman Vincent. I believe Councilman Vincent.
Sorry, you broke up on me there. So, I just have one real quick thing. Our next Plan Commission meeting will be on Tuesday, November 10th. Among other things, they're going to be talking about additional changes to our sign ordinance. We'll hear more about that in Tuesday.
Councilman Galloway.
Mayor's Veterans Committee met on the Monday, the 12th. Young will be the guest speaker. It's still up in the, we don't exactly know what we're going to do about it yet. So Mayor's supposed to be talking to the head of the committee. I imagine it'll be, I don't know, Zoom or taped or something. And Police Merit Commission met on the 13th. I guess they got some cars coming. They're still looking for a backup generator, and right now the promotion school is going on. That's all I got.
Just to add to that, it will not be an in-person one, but we're working out the technology between Jess Bruder and Tim Frankie to have a pre-recorded veteran ceremony. But I think it's important. I think we all agree and appreciate the committee's support of making sure we have something on Veterans Day.
Sounds good.
Councilwoman West.
At the October 7th Fire Merit Commissioners meeting, it was announced of the approval of the administrative assistant Don Prater to chair between the fire department and the auditorium effective immediately. They are also in the process of updating the pictures of the gap and the entrance of the fire station on 18th Street. And the next meeting will be November 7th at 6:30.
Councilman Frankie?
Councilman, Your Honor. No offense, though. In addition, for the police commission, there are 4 new officers to be sworn in tomorrow at Board of Works, I believe. Is that still happening?
Correct.
Okay. And they had given an update on the promotion school that's currently going on the Civic. They said it's the best attended promotion school they've ever had. So that's encouraging and shows the officers are taking pride in what they do and interested in moving up the ranks. The school board met on October 12th and they discussed the 2021 budget, and we'll be voting on that on the next school board meeting, which will be November 9th at the Educational Services Center, formerly known as Boston Middle School, at 6 p.m. And some residents I know were upset about the possibility of the bus garage going in the land adjacent from LaPorte Middle School, but they did mention at that meeting that they are looking at other areas to consider as well. So that's encouraging for those that were upset. The redevelopment commission will meet next Wednesday at 5:15 at City Hall. That's all the updates I have.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on. October 24th is World Polio Day, and I have Bob Fryer from Rotary International, our local chapter here. I'll say a couple words, but first, they have supplied us with a proclamation that I'd like to read. Proclamation. Whereas Rotary is a global network of neighbors, friends, leaders, and problem solvers who unite and take action to create lasting change in communities across the globe. And whereas the Rotary motto, service above self, inspires members to provide humanitarian service, follow high ethical standards, and promote goodwill and peace in the world. And whereas Rotary in 1985 launched Polio Plus, and in 1988 helped establish the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, which today includes the World Health Organization, U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, UNICEF, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and Gavi, a vaccine alliance to immunize the children of the world against polio. And polio cases have dropped by 99.9% since 1988, and the world stands on the threshold of eradicating the disease. And to date, Rotary has contributed more than US 2.1 billion in countless volunteer hours to protecting more than 2.5 billion children in 122 countries. And whereas Rotary is working to raise an additional 50 million per year, which would be leveraged for maximum impact by an additional 100 million annually from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And whereas these efforts are providing much needed operational support, medical staff, laboratory equipment, and educational materials for health workers and parents. And whereas in addition, Rotary has played a major role in decisions by donor governments contribute more than 10 billion to the effort. And whereas there are over 1.2 million Rotary members in more than 35,000 clubs throughout the world that sponsor service projects to address such critical issues as poverty, disease, hunger, illiteracy, and the environment in their local communities and abroad. Whereas the Rotary Club of LaPorte has been a long time and consistent supporter of the Rotary Polio Plus efforts. Therefore, I, Thomas Dermody, Mayor of the City of LaPorte, hereby proclaim the 24th day of October 2020 as World Polio Day. In LaPorte, Indiana, encourage all citizens to join me, Rotary International, and the Rotary Club of LaPorte in the fight for a polio-free world. In witness whereof, I hereunto set my hand in the great seal of the city of LaPorte, state of Indiana, this 19th day of October 2020. And here we have it. And we're fortunate to have Bob Pryor from the local Rotary Club. Bob, is there anything you'd like to add there? And thank you for the efforts.
Thank you. I guess on behalf of Rotary Club of LaPorte and further Rotary International, Rotary's, to add a little bit to what you said, Rotary's been working to eradicate polio for more than 35 years. And our goal of ridding the world of this disease is closer than ever, as you pointed out, Tom. Polio cases have been reduced by 99.9%, or 99.8% as you indicated in the proclamation. And today, polio remains endemic only in Afghanistan and Pakistan, but it's crucial to continue working to keep other countries polio free. If all eradication efforts stop today, within 10 years, polio can paralyze as many as 200,000 children each year. So, thank you for that proclamation. Those are my words.
Thank you for the work that you do along with Rotary. Any comments from the council? Thank you, Bob, and please pass on to all your members.
All right, thank you.
And you're welcome to stay on if you like. You're welcome to leave as well.
I'll probably be leaving, but wish you all the best.
All right.
Hey, Mayor, I'd like to make a correction for the next school board meeting. There's a special school board meeting on October 26th. I had said November 12th, but I stand corrected. October 26th is the next school board meeting.
We'll make that change. So as we talk about water, wastewater, stormwater, the previous council a couple years ago had discussion about increasing rates. We do have a situation where I'm hearing, Councilman Franklin, am I hearing a little background noise?
Yeah, there's some echo. You're probably picking up a net speaker.
Okay. I'll have a net maybe mute. Roger, if possible. But what we have, I'm trying to address here. I'm sorry. We'll see if this speaker's here down. Hold 1 second. Is this better? I'm still picking up some.
My guess is the audio from someone nearby's computer is coming into your mic.
Roger, is yours muted?
Yep.
Okay, they're both. And Courtney, can you mute just in case?
If those around Mayor could just turn their volume down a little on the computer, that should help.
My apologies. Let's see here.
Yours shouldn't matter, Mayor. It's the other computers.
Better?
Yeah.
Better. Okay. So we'll move on, but as the council considers the infrastructure needs of the future here, we thought it'd be great. You had a presentation at the last meeting from Jerry Jackson in our wastewater department. And tonight we have a couple of presentations. The first one here with Tim Warner from the City of LaPorte Water Department. I'm going to turn it over to Tim. Tim Warner.
Thank you, Mary. Good evening, Council. Just a few things we want to start talking about. As the Mayor mentioned, the infrastructure, not only in LaPorte, but as a nation as a whole, is in dire need of repair. The EPA estimates over the next 20 years that municipalities have put over $77 billion in their infrastructure just to keep it running. At the water department, our mission has always been to engage in providing the most high quality water well within the EPA and IDEM standards. Our goal of water professionals is to always put forward a good effort in that. Customer service, our guys are 24/7, 365 days a week. They respond to many flooding problems inside people's homes or leaks out in the street. Next slide, please. What we do, we provide clean, safe drinking water to over 22,000 people within inside the city limits. That means the water department directly touches the health of 22,000 people within the city limits. We maintain 2 production plants. Each have a 6 million gallon a day capacity. Service and maintain over 1,100 fire hydrants, over 140 miles of infrastructure through main service lines and other means. We pump roughly 3 million a day to all the residents and businesses around the port. Next slide, please. The City of LaPorte's water department is one of the oldest systems, the 3rd oldest system in the state of Indiana, out of over 4,000 systems. It's been in operation since 1870. As you all know, as population grows, the water system has to grow. Next slide, please. Some of the things we need to do to maintain the water system, to ensure that we provide safe, healthy drinking water to all the residents and businesses. A few of the things we need to do, it all starts with supplying the plants with water. We're blessed here in the Midwest to have abundance of groundwater. We do not pump any water out of any of the lakes, as some of the communities around us do. It all starts with groundwater for us. Our Lake Street plant was built in 1929. Right now we have 10 supply wells that feed both the plants. Plant 2 would be the east side plant. It has 6 active wells that run to it. So that leaves 4 going to Lake Street plant. Out of those 4 wells that go to Lake Street plant, 3 of them are failing at this time. In the past, what they've done is they drill a well, they test it, say it tests out at 1,200 gallons per minute. They would put a 1,200 gallon a minute pump in that well. Over time, the industry has changed. They've realized that high velocity of pulling water plugs the wells up. They don't last as long. A couple of years ago, 2011, we drilled 3 new wells at Plant 2. They test out between 1,200 and 1,500 gallons a minute. We put 600 gallon a minute pumps in them. Those wells have stood up to time. We have less drop off with those wells. So, new construction plans, new standards in the industry definitely would help wells last a little longer. Many of our wells were drilled in the 60s. So, LaPorte as a whole in the water department definitely got their use out of them. Next slide, please. Plant 2 pumps about 65% of our daily pumping to residents. As you can see in the picture here, the white circles are the pressure filter tanks. So we push water with a pump through those tanks. Basically out the bottom comes your clean filtered drinking water. That header you see there with the green, the brown, the dark blue, those all indicate different flows from raw water to backwash water to fresh drinking water on the bottom. That's a steel welded header. Over the years, we've had many repairs in them. You can kind of see one on the brown pipe at the bottom there, but there's several inside there. A couple years ago, we had an engineer company come in and do some testing on that piping and found that it's thinning in several places. That is a major concern to me. Before I was the superintendent, I was a maintenance facility supervisor, and it was one of the things I always worried about. With Plant 2 doing 65% of our pumping, if something was to happen to that header, which it will, it's just a matter of time, that could cripple our pumping capacities in the city limits. Because we don't have the water at Plant 1 to treat. That's one of the reasons why we need a new well field for Plant 1. Once replaced, we would also do some work on the filters there, possibly change out the media, possibly put in some VFDs and different motors, which would reduce the pumping cost over time. Next slide, please. Another major problem inside the city are dead ends. When the system was built in the early 1900s, the city, as well as many cities did, would run, the shortest path to feed the most amount of customers. They weren't concerned about looping these dead ends, and LaPorte has a huge amount of dead ends in the heart of the city. What this does is create stagnant water, flow issues. I'm sure some of the people have all been through it when we're out flushing hydrants and they get what we call dirty water, which is suspended rust inside the water. That's because of the flow rates through those pipes is at such a velocity because it's trying to find its way around those dead ends to get to where the water needs to go. By looping those dead ends in, you can see in the red on the bottom there, that just gives a better flow through the city, allows the water to take its path that it needs to reach whatever the strain on the system is, whether it's a working fire or maybe a main break. This will also help with the flows in fire situations, not only by protecting the city residents from these dirty water events, but also bringing more water to the hydrant. For instance, as many of you know, around the mall right now, the old mall, the Rural King property there, we tied in a dead end main that looped that property. Out of the hydrants that protect that property in the back, we got several hundred gallons a minute more out of those hydrants. Next slide. I'm sure to some people that's a scary image right there. That's a 4-inch main that's been in service for about 100 years. The scaling inside there is tuberculation, and what that is rust buildup on the inside of the pipe. It grows from constantly having water inside there. So when we have those high velocity events that I was talking about earlier, that water is traveling through that pipe at a very high velocity, which scores some of that scaling off. And that's when you see dirty water or brownish water, tinted water in your toilets or coming out of your sink. Over the years, it just happens, this builds up. The new ductile pipe that we install, 350 class pressure pipe, has actually a concrete lining on the inside of that, which prevents a lot of this buildup and tuberculation that forms inside pipes over the years. Not only does this cause dirty water events, but you can also see it contributes to the takeaway of internal capacity of the pipe. You can see there's about at least an inch to inch and a half of buildup all around that pipe. That was a 4-inch diameter pipe when it was installed. Next slide, please. Another major problem in the city is broken valves. We have roughly 800 to 900 valves in the city. We have 75 documented broken valves. When a valve breaks, 90% of the time it breaks shut. So what that does is create 2 dead ends on each side of the valve. We just got done talking about dead ends. You can kind of see by the picture how that creates 2 additional dead ends. The reason why the valves are important to us is if there was a major event, say a natural disaster or something that came through LaPorte, we would be able to isolate different areas of the town to prevent big water loss or a drop in system pressure. Item standards say anything under 20 PSI in the system, you have to shut it down and order a boil order. LaPorte's been lucky over the years. We haven't had a boil order in quite some time. But some of the surrounding communities deal with them on a regular basis. Our guys fix all mains live, which kudos to them. They keep the water system safe and operating during those high stress times. The nice thing about the broken valves system that I want to put into place is our guys can do about 95% of that work in-house, which not only is a benefit for the city, but it's going to stretch our dollars out a little a lot farther. If you have to pay a contractor to come in and do these line stops and cut these valves out, it gets pretty costly. So basically, we can do it in-house with our crew and basically get more bang for our buck. We'll be able to get more valves done for a cheaper price. Next slide, please. Lead line services. We've all, in the last couple of years, have seen or heard about what we don't like to discuss in the water industry. It's the 5-letter F word, Flint. Little different scenario there, but all systems do have lead lines and lead goosenecks in them. One of the projects I want to put in place is start to remove these lead lines from inside the city limits. As we do some of these main replacement projects, you attack those as you're moving down. Just because the line coming in your house isn't lead doesn't mean that the service connection at the main, they call that a gooseneck, isn't lead, and then turning the galvanized pipe. We see that a lot around the city. Like I said, lead's a big sticking point for a lot of people. I do want to ensure the public that lead is currently not a problem in LaPorte. We test well under the recommended amounts for lead in the water. We test all the schools. The EPA and IDEM are putting a new lead and copper rule in effect starting next year. So we'll have to test schools built between a certain year and nursing homes and medical facilities a little more often. We currently put orthophosphate, which is a corrosion inhibitor, into the water, and that only helps coat the inside of the pipes. That way you don't get the suspended materials or copper and lead through the water, but it also helps on the wastewater side of things. Next slide, please. So in general, when the citizens of LaPorte turn on their faucet, they expect to see clean running water. And we do our best to provide that, but the longer we let these problems build up, the more expensive they get and the more frequent they're going to happen in a larger scale. So I'm just coming to the council and to the public tonight just to make them aware of some of the issues that we have here in the city of LaPorte, and it's time that we deal with them as a community and as a city. That's all I have tonight. If there's any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
Tim, thank you. And before the council may ask any questions, I want to say we're very fortunate with the superintendent of our water, Tim Warner, and our wastewater program, Jerry Jackson, to have people that are well thought of throughout the state of Indiana, right here in the city of LaPorte. So we're fortunate. And at that point, are there any questions for Tim or for his presentation? Okay, hearing none.
Let me off easy.
Well, and I'll have a presentation. We won't do it right now, but we're going to move it down a bit. But we'll talk about the complete utilities infrastructure discussion shortly. But first, I would like to move Councilwoman West for a second and final reading and ordinance. Councilwoman, mute. I think you're on mute.
And I told myself, don't forget to unmute, and I forgot. So, Your Honor, I move to read an ordinance for the second time by title only.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to read by title only. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Councilwoman West.
An ordinance amending ordinance 18-2019 of the City of LaPorte, Indiana, to establish salary for a new position in the office of the clerk treasurer.
Do I have a motion?
Motion to accept the ordinance as presented.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion? Clerk Treasurer Parthun, would you like to speak on this? Briefly.
I'm trying to keep my IT skills in order over here. I knew you'd ask me. So just for the information of residents, I'm sad to say, but also excited for Joni. Our deputy clerk treasurer is retiring in 2021. And although we've got some time, plenty of time, and I know she's here tonight, so I don't wish to make her sad or alarm anyone else. We need to definitely train a deputy clerk treasurer. It's a big job. They're big shoes to fill. So this position is in the budget for 2021, but we're looking to get someone started right away in 2020.
Any other questions, discussion? Thanks. Hearing none, all those in favor state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. So now we'll move to the utilities infrastructure plan. I put a brief presentation together as we prepare to talk about the needs that you've heard from our wastewater department and our water department, that I think it's important for not only you, the council, and the public. And we've kind of themed it, investing in the health and safety of our community. So we'll move to, the time is now. And basically what we're stating here is our water and wastewater systems are more than 100 years old. Many of the infrastructure was put in place before 1901. We have the third oldest water system in the state, as you heard Tim Warner discuss. Out of 4,000 water systems, ours is the third oldest. And here's the number that should scare you, shock you. We have over $100 million in infrastructure needs. And if you look just at this picture, this is an actual picture of one of our infrastructure points on Plain Street, and brick, which isn't even allowed anymore to be put in the state as a wastewater sewer type system. You can no longer use brick. You can see right here in the picture how groundwater can flow through, seep through the bricks, and this is the type of infrastructure we're dealing with. And the city cannot keep up with the cost of this rapidly aging system under the current revenue stream that we have. So as you look at our wastewater system, we're constantly battling flooding and backups. Approximately 75% of the city sewer system is made of combined sewers, which means it carries wastewater and stormwater in the same line. The EPA doesn't even allow combined sewers anymore. Heavy rain events can overload the treatment plant, and just think, untreated sewage flowing when a treatment plant backs up, it backs up and yards and flows through people's yards and animal waste, and then untreated sewage flows downstream, Kankakee River. Think about how many times you fish, you might boat, or our residents go down to the Kankakee, and think about that with, again, waste flowing through there and dealing with E. coli and so forth. It also can overflow the storm drains, causing flooding in streets and basement backups. Again, potential E. coli from yards flowing, animal waste, and so forth. And as we talk about this, think about the backups in the letter and number streets for those of you that cover. I know Sarah Brown represents that area. And when we get a heavy rain, what happens? The streets floods, residents back up. And leaks in the old infrastructure causes soil to wash away, resulting in sinkholes, and the failure caves the sewer system. And all of a sudden, think about if you can't use that any longer, you won't be able to flush, you won't be able to receive water. And even elected officials are not free from sinkholes. And our clerk treasurer had a sinkhole, right after she was elected, open up on her road. So these are real issues, not problems down in Florida, Texas, California. These are problems in the city of LaPorte, right in our backyard. Fending off system. You heard Tim Warner just speak about, our water supplying wells are reaching the life expectancy at Plant 1. infrastructure aging and approaching at failure at Plant 2, which accounts for roughly 65% of the daily pumping to residents. If that pump goes down, how are we going to supply 100% of the residents with a plant that only is providing 35% of the, I guess, pressure? And you can see the sediment in pipe from years of use that restricts flow and contributes to dirty water events. And our lead service lines need replaced. And while we're not having problems with lead currently, the EPA and IDEM are tightening up their regulations, and this will be an issue we can't ignore. So we believe it's time to take action, and take action now in 2021. We have before you that you'll begin hearing about between now and have the opportunity for the public to hear and then vote on in November, an infrastructure investment that doesn't solve the complete problem, but begins to address the needs to keep our residents out of danger. And that's beginning a $25 million infrastructure plan. And just a few of the infrastructure items that would be done in this is, number one, sewer separation. Monroe Manor in the final phase. That's a $3 million project alone. The letter and number streets. We have to address the letter and number streets that are flooding the streets and backing up into people's residence in their basement. You heard about new water supply with the new wells at Plant 1, and then replacing the broken valves, undersized mains, improving water quality. That, again, the total infrastructure investment just initially, and remember, we have $100 million ask. Initially here, it would be $25 million. And these projects will not happen overnight. These are some that happen beginning in 2021, but I don't believe we can kick the can down the road any longer. We must take action now. I want to give you, because again, we can't pay for this under our current situation. This is something we're going to have to ask the public for, but I want to give you a comparison of where we are right now. Combined rates of stormwater, wastewater, and water based on 4,000 gallon residential bill, which is the state average for a homeowner, is 4,000 gallons. And if you look here all the way to, I guess it would be to our left, LaPorte's current bill compared to many communities, you look at Plymouth, Michigan City, South Bend, Valpo, Warsaw, Mishawaka are all very high. And you see the state average, we're very low compared to the state average currently. And our plan is to stay very competitive and stay below the state average, because again, the state average in water, for example, in the past 3 years has gone up $5. And you have not seen that happen in the city of LaPorte. So city of LaPorte here, you can see based on increases, we will move up the rank here. But again, understand the state average is where it is right now. That state average is going to continue to move forward because everyone has infrastructure needs. How are we going to pay for it? For example, again, we want to use a hypothetical rate using 4,000 gallons. And again, you're billed for what you use, but 4,000 gallons is an average in the state of Indiana. And if you look at the water, wastewater, and stormwater, the percent change in year one, your bill would be $4.96 higher a month. So you would go from $48.94 to $53.90 per month, $4.96. And this bond would be, we would look for a 4-year increase, which would bring the current bill from $48.94 to the bill in 2024 at $62.78. And again, when you see the state average, we will still be below the state average as that number has increased over the past few years and will continue to increase. We took an example of the 4,000 gallons. It's best to give homeowners an example, and we thought that would be best. But also you have the commercial And then if you could move on to the next slide, for example, the industrial customers. Now, again, these are the big, large businesses, the large retailers who have most of the roof surface and impervious surface of pavements. Now, a couple years ago, the council looked at this and moved and kept their rate at $5.49. If we're going to bond for this 25 million, we have to bring businesses and who have the large impervious retail services and business services to their rate that they use. And again, they're the biggest user of stormwater impervious surfaces between their parking lot, between their roof, and their numbers would increase. But as we've checked in other communities that have stormwater part of their bill, it's not out of line to where other businesses are. And the only other option would be to charge to increase residential rates to pay for those of business. And it's a conversation we have to have with businesses, and one that I think we can keep as competitive as possible. One of the things that we are suggesting in the 4-inch industrial customer use is that 50% of their rate increase goes into effect 2021, and then the remaining portion goes in 2022. So, for example, if their stormwater rate, as you can see here, was $823, only half of that would appear in 2021 at $412.50, and the second half for the full rate would be $823.50. So what does that mean? And I'll kind of move on to the next chart. Residents, the impact on residents, what you're paying versus what you're receiving. And nobody wants to raise fees, no one wants to raise costs, but we can't turn the other way. And so at $4.96 a month increase for a resident that's averaging 4,000 gallons, we're talking about 17 cents a day for improved water quality, improved public safety with the fire flow, and fewer flooding and backup incidents. That is $4.96 is 2 coffees a month, 4 bottles of water. And again, we look at cable bills, we look at other bills. We are very competitively priced. And unfortunately, are an older community that has $100 million worth of infrastructure need that we cannot kick the can down the road any longer. So with that, I'll move. We don't have to act now, but if we fail to act now, we have to be prepared to deal with water quality, which will continue to diminish or will diminish, dirty water events occurring more frequently, potential boil orders, continued flooding in basements and backups. And I want to make sure we understand that, because when we get a heavy rain, the calls come flowing in too about everybody that's having their basement flood, their roads flood, and that's a real situation for our community. Potential fines from the EPA and IDEM, because they're not going to tolerate the lead, tolerate the joint, the term I'm looking for, between stormwater and, I'm trying to think, I'm looking at Joni here, but
Combined sewers, Mayor.
Combined sewers, thank you, sir. And all that happens is we kick this down the road, and it's a more expensive repair. So what might be $100 million now will be $120 million down the road for a future council and a future mayor to deal with. But some of these situations, and I think Tim Warner, our water superintendent, put it best, our water situation with the wells is a ticking time bomb. And then where do the dollars come if we wait for something to happen? So with that, I know I have Jerry and Tim on the line with me that can answer all the technical questions, but from a council perspective, before we get into the ordinances, are there any questions you may have or items that we can answer? Or from the public, and Nick Otis would be on that we can answer questions from the public because we have to engage them.
Mayor, I think that this was not a question from the public, and you kind of touched on this, but maybe Jerry could hit on it. You mentioned that with combined sewer stormwater, that significant storm events, that human waste can get into the ditches. But Jerry, that ends up in the Mississippi River, correct? And then ends up in the Gulf of Mexico and causes significant environmental damage down in the Gulf of Mexico. Is that right?
That's correct. Our overflow point is here at the treatment plant. So when the treatment plant becomes overloaded and we have an overflow, it overflows the Travis Ditch, which is down to the Kankakee River, and then eventually to the Mississippi River. It's a concern for users of those streams, some of who pull drinking water, and it's a concern that you've heard of the discharge of the Mississippi River in the dead zone there in the Gulf of Mexico. So that all that nutrient load contributes to the problem.
When you say dead zone, we're talking about thousands of square miles of the Gulf of Mexico, correct?
That is correct. The nutrients in the organic load eat up all the oxygen in the mouth of the river for, as you said, a very large area, and there's no oxygen in that zone of the Gulf, and everything in it either runs away or dies.
Any other questions from the public?
Mayor, I'm not seeing any questions right now.
Questions for the council
How about a comment?
or comment?
Yeah, hate to raise the rates, but I don't think we have much choice. We need too much infrastructure.
Mayor, if I could add something, just to bring things in perspective real quick. That picture of that 4-inch pipe, that's not an isolated piece of pipe inside the city limits. Right now, we currently have 22 miles of 4-inch pipe inside the city limits of LaPorte.
Other questions? And Jerry Jackson, not to put you on the spot, but if a council member would like to see a industrial customer, if they have a question that, hey, what would an industrial customer go to in a stormwater fee, new one, they could call the office and we could run close to that rate, correct? Jerry, I think you're muted.
I promised myself I wouldn't forget to unmute either. The rate is based on the hard surface, because hard surface is generates stormwater. The water can't soak into the ground, so the asphalt parking lots, the roof, the compacted gravel areas all generate runoff. And the way the rate is calculated is we took a typical number, averaged a bunch of homes, and said, okay, there's this much square footage for a home. They pay $5.49 for that typical square footage. The rate eventually, when we get to 100% for industries, it's just the straight multiplier. 549 times the number of times of square footage of hard surface that the home has. So yeah, we can run that number and run through the calculation, shows you where it comes from. This essentially just brings the rate of large customers up to what the homeowners are paying now.
And as well, we can break out the Kroger complex, for example. We currently bill each individual tenant right now, and the owner of that complex could break out the impervious roof surface and pavement service per tenant to help soften the blow across the board.
Correct. We can, and we've got the tools to do that sort of thing. We've got the mapping and aerial photography, and we have produced those numbers.
Hey Jerry, if a business owner, or I should say a commercial landlord, had a property that was already divided and had their tenants paying that water bill, would it automatically, these fees would automatically go to that tenant and not the property owner, correct?
the way we would like to build is if the large owner can designate this part of my property is utilized by this business, we would then fill it out separately. So there's some work there involving the property owner to make that happen. The intent is to make that happen as we get to the 100% rate. There's some complexity there, but it's not too bad because there aren't that many large customers that have multiple tenants divided up. So we're gonna depend on the landlords, the owners, property owners, to help us put those numbers together. But you're correct.
Bert Cook, would you like to, I guess you represent the business community and how important water and sewer are to our industrial base?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Bert Cook, Executive Director of the LaPorte Economic Advancement Partnership. I guess I would just chime in that we have that, that list of those top 10 criteria that every business is looking for when they consider any location. And I promise you that utilities are always in those top 5. It's one of those criteria that you just either have solid utilities or you don't. And if you do not, there's no way you can grow, especially on that industrial and commercial side of things. So making sure that we not only have solid utilities, but we will have those on into the future will without a doubt dictate, how we're able to grow as a community. Thank you.
Any other questions from the council? Anything that you'd like to see happen between now and November 3rd meeting, 2nd meeting? I'd highly encourage everybody to talk to Tim Warner, Jerry Jackson. This is an important item for the future of the city of LaPorte.
Mayor, we do have a couple questions at this point. One of the questions, is it possible for new technology to line the inside of the 4-inch pipe with a plastic liner? What would be the cost of the pipe up and laying new pipes and the longevity of new technology versus digging? I don't know if that's a question maybe for Tim or Jerry there.
No, I can answer that.
Yeah.
So with the lining of the 4-inch mains, we're still restricting the flow through those undersized mains. At that point, I think it's more feasible to go ahead and replace with larger mains to help that flow and just to build the heart of the city up more to be able to grow and expand out. You can't keep building larger mains on the back end of something that has smaller mains feeding the system. A lot of communities do the plastic lining or the ice pigging, but I think a lot of that's done in larger size mains where it's more cost effective at that point and makes more sense for us as a city to replace those 4-inch mains with 8-inch mains just to be able to push that water out equally throughout the city and into the new growth parts of the city.
Then there's another question. Where does the base rate of $5.49, how is that arrived at?
Well, and I'm going to just let Eric Walsh jump right into that and can explain that.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. My name is Eric Walsh. I'm a partner with Baker Tilly Municipal Advisors. I think I've met many of the council. I know there's some new faces that I probably have not got the opportunity to meet, but our firm's been the municipal advisors for the city for a number of years. We were formerly known as Umbaugh. You may recognize that name. We merged with Baker Tilly a little over a year ago, still all the same folks, et cetera. To answer the specific question, and I also have some additional information I'm happy to share once we're through the Q&A portion. The $5.49 was derived from a study that was done by, in combination of the city, Christopher Burke Engineering out of Chicago, and our firm. And what Christopher Burke did, along with the city, is what Jerry Jackson alluded to earlier. They looked at every parcel within the city, residential, commercial, industrial, and came up with what an average residential impervious area is. And that number is 3,000 square feet. So there's going to be homes that have more roof, parking, sidewalk, whatever. Impervious area is just a surface that water cannot penetrate. Okay. So when they went through that calculation and came up with the 3,000 square foot average, they then took all of the cost associated with operating the stormwater utility. And that's not only some of the operation of the men and women that work for the stormwater and sewage works, but also and primarily really driven by capital improvement needs. The mayor hit on some of these projects just a minute ago and highlighted them, and I'm going to show you some slides here later that show some additional ones, but really it's the sewer separation and the flooding issue. So when we took all that information together, we came up with an annual cost to help eliminate some of the flooding, help separate some of the sewers, and also operate the stormwater utility. When you divide that cost over all of the impervious area and the equivalent dwelling units, EDUs, that's where we came up with the $5.49 as a base. That's the amount that needs to be generated per equivalent dwelling unit or equivalent residential unit to generate the money to operate and replace and separate these sewers. I'll go back to when I'm saying equivalent dwelling unit or equivalent residential unit, also known as an EDU or an ERU. That is when you take all that impervious area. Let's say you have an industrial customer that has hundreds of thousands of square feet of impervious area. You divide that by the 3,000 that the residential base is set at, and that's how you get the ERUs or the EDUs. So when the mayor showed those hypotheticals earlier, and you saw the one that had 30 ERUs, and you saw the one at 150 ERUs, that would be 150 times the size of a residential, or 150 times 3,000 square feet. So you're talking pretty large industrials, factories, schools, whatever it may be, with a lot of roof and a lot of parking lot.
Any questions, or Nick, are there any, because we want to make sure the public has their concerns answered and questions answered.
Mayor, no new questions at this time. I'll obviously keep an eye on it throughout the meeting as well if more questions come up.
Council, any other questions? Okay, we will move on now. Councilman Galloway, introduction of an ordinance.
Your Honor, I'd like to introduce an ordinance for the first time.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 7-0. Councilman Galloway.
An ordinance amending ordinance number 4-2018 of the City of LaPorte relating to the issuance of sewage works, revenue bonds, and all matters related thereto. Whereas the City of LaPorte, Indiana, the city, has heretofore established and constructed and currently owns and operates the sewage works for the collection and treatment of sewage and other wastes, the sewage works, pursuant to the provisions of Indiana Code 36-9-23, as amended, the Act. And whereas the Common Council of the City, the Common Council, on February 20, 2018, adopted its ordinance number 4-2018, ordinance number 4-2018, authorizing the issuance of sewage works revenue bonds, the bonds, to finance the cost of certain improvements to the sewage works of the city, the project, in an amount not to exceed $18 million. And whereas the Common Council has determined to increase the maximum authorized principal amount of the bonds to $20 million, to expand the description of the project to be financed with the proceeds of the bonds, and to deem all references to H.J. Umbaugh in ordinance number 4-2018 as referring to Baker Tilly Municipal Advisors. Now therefore be it ordained by the Common Council of the City of LaPorte, Indiana, as follows. Section 1, amendments. Ordinance number 4-2018 is hereby amended to A, increase the maximum authorized principal amount of the bonds to $20 million. B, provide that the project shall be expanded to include the following: primary effluent pump rebuilds, cylinder transition from gas chlorination to liquid bleach, lift station rehab, and property purchase, and provide that all references to H.J. Umball shall be redeemed to refer to Baker Tilly Municipal Advisors. Effecting this, the provisions of this ordinance shall take effect and be in full force and effect from and after passage and adoption by the Common Council of City of LaPorte, Indiana, LaPorte County, in conformance with applicable law.
Thank you, Councilman Galloway. So, Eric, not to put you on the spot, but you want to explain exactly what this does?
Sure. Back in 2018, the council adopted a bond ordinance, and a bond ordinance is really what lays out the parameters for the city to issue debt. So it really creates maximums within that ordinance. That ordinance only allowed for the bond size to go up to approximately $18 million. As now we're 2.5 years later, there's been additional projects that have been identified to be part of this bond issue. Obviously, costs go up over time, et cetera. Now we're looking at a bond issue that's a little less than $20 million. So we need the additional allowance, if you will, to increase that bond size. And I'll also clarify, even though this says sewage works, your stormwater utility lies within your sewage works. So this 20 million we're talking about is really a combination of stormwater and sewage projects both.
Discussion?
Is this actually time sensitive for this bond?
Yes.
Okay, so can I go ahead and make a motion to suspend the rules?
Yeah, Carol, just real quick. Yes, we are requesting that. Bond counsel Barnes and Thornburg has requested that to keep that moving. One comment. This has nothing to do with setting sewer, stormwater, or water rates tonight. This is just for the bond itself. Just want to be clear both to the council and to the public. The council's not skipping a step here to increase rates. This is just for the bonds themselves. We'll have the same request for item 15 later in the meeting.
Hey, Nick, can you explain the urgency for this?
This is in keeping with the timeline, Councilman Frankie, of selling the bonds to lock in the lowest interest rate possible.
And maybe I can add to that, Nick. We're looking at an early, really a late November bond pricing and an early December closing on the bond. So that's kind of when you would get your money to be able to start the projects. The lead up to that includes getting a rating on these bonds from Standard & Poor's. Right now, with interest rates being so low, there's a rush all over the country of people issuing bonds. So what typically would take about 2.5 weeks to get a rating with Standard & Poor's is now taking 4 to 6 weeks. So by having this bond ordinance in hand that authorizes us to go up to the higher amount, we're hoping to get in line sooner to Standard & Poor's, get that rating, and be able to issue the bonds per our original timeline, which would get you the money in early December.
Thanks.
So I do have a motion to suspend the rules. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor state by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. So we've now suspended the rules. Do I have a motion for second reading?
I make a motion to, well, does Riker have to make that motion?
Doesn't make a difference.
Anybody can.
Okay. Make a motion to read the ordinance by the second time by title only.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor state by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Councilman Galloway.
An ordinance amending ordinance number 4-2018, the city of LaPorte relating to the issuance of sewage works, revenue bonds, and all matters related thereto.
Do I have a motion?
Motion to adopt the ordinance is presented.
Second.
I have a motion to adopt and a second. Discussion?
Hey, just real quick, Eric, do you have any sense of where the rate may come in at on this?
Yeah, right now, what we're using, and it's actually in the presentation that Courtney did have pulled up, but you don't have to pull it up again, Courtney. I'll just give you the numbers here. We're looking over a 20-year bond, interest rates ranging from 1% to 3%, so probably an average interest rate in the mid-2s. So pretty, for 20-year borrowing, that's pretty cheap money.
So I do have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0.
Just for the record, Mayor, I'm abstaining from this because of my position being a financial advisor and selling bonds. I just want to abstain.
We have Councilwoman Brown that will abstain, and the motion passes 6-0. So before we move on to number 12, I would like to have Eric Walsh do a brief presentation.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. Courtney's pulling up on the screen. I believe you all also have a copy of this report dated October 2nd, 2020. As the rates are really somewhat interrelated, as the mayor went through his presentation, I'm going to hit on topics that are related to items 12, 13, and 14 in your agenda, the stormwater rates, water rates, and sewer rates. I'm happy to come back as you get to those agenda items, but I'm going to kind of take them all together here. Courtney, if you would go to the next page where it has the hypothetical rates that the mayor already showed. Thank you. I want to kind of start off with the stormwater rates. I'm going to kind of work backwards here. But if you notice in the top example where it's the residential customer at 4,000 gallons and 1 ERU, I already explained kind of where the 1 ERU comes from. That's the average of all your residentials at about 3,000 square feet of impervious area. So that's usually your roof and your driveway. Adding those up, about 3,000 is an average. What you'll notice is the stormwater rate, the third line down, is not changing through any of these phases. It stays at the $5.49. So when you see the percentage and the dollar changes to a residential, and you'll notice those percentages are 10% in the first, and then it goes down in the latter three phases. And you compare those to the larger industrial and even commercial examples where it's higher percentages. The sole driver of those higher percentages, when you take all three rates into account, is the stormwater rate, okay? So I want everyone to understand, especially the public, we're not raising the non-residential customer sewer and water rates by more percentage-wise than we are the residential. Jerry said this earlier, but I want to make sure everyone caught it. What's really happening is the industrial and commercial, or the non-residential customers, are going back to the rates that they were originally set at in 2018, and that the residential customers have been paying ever since. Okay, that was originally adopted and then was amended and taking those rates back down. We're just taking them back to what was originally proposed in the 2008 rate ordinance for stormwater. And we're doing that in a two-phase or a two-step sequence. So they'll see about half of that increase in 2021 and the other half in 2022. We fully recognize, and the mayor, and I know many of you that sit on the council recognize, many of these commercial and industrial entities obviously operate on a budget just like the city does and the city utilities. It's hard partway through a budget cycle to make changes. So that's why we advise, and the mayor kind of was asking the question, can we do this in a stepstone here so they have some time to adjust and they don't get the full impact until 2022. That's the reason for the two-phase rate increase. The second piece that I want to go back to is some additional, and the mayor hit on this, that Jerry can easily pull up if you have specific customers you wanted to look at of what would their rate impact be. But I want to give you a little kind of food for thought on the bottom example, the 150 ERUs, where their bill would be going on stormwater from $5.49 currently to over $400 in 2021, and over $800 in 2022 and beyond. So that is a customer that would be approximately 450,000 square feet of impervious area, or 150 times a residential. So that's not, your mom and pop store or your local store. That's a large factory, commercial box store, something of that nature with large parking lot, large space that would be seeing this impact. And you may be asking, well, why would their monthly bill be so large as compared to a residential? What drives that? And it's a pretty difficult concept to explain, but I'll try to do so, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And please, council members, do interrupt if you do have a question. I'm happy to answer those on the fly. When you think of water and sewer, that gets built on the water that runs through your water meter. So the more water you use, the more water that then in turn goes into the sewage collection system and gets treated at the plant. So both your water and sewer bill is driven off of your water consumption, and it's measured by a meter. So obviously, the more you use, the higher your bill. The less you use, the lower your bill. We can't measure stormwater, right? We can't measure the amount of rainfall that hits your property and then runs into our collection basins and collection system, or in the older parts of the city, runs into the combined sewer system and gets treated by the sewer plant. What we can do is measure impervious area, as Jerry and the mayor alluded to earlier. So it's the same concept for stormwater. We're saying, how much stormwater are you contributing to our system, or how much usage of our system are you taking up? And if you have 300,000 square feet of impervious area where water is collecting, running off, entering our system, you're going to pay incrementally or proportionally that many times what a residential who only has 3,000 square feet of impervious area. So even though we can't meter it, this is a nationally recognized method of calculating the amount of stormwater bill based on the different sizes and the different usage of your stormwater collection system. So it truly is cost driven. I just want people to understand this isn't, these ERUs, equivalent residential units, are not something that is just calculated. It is driven by the mapping and the measurement of these individuals. And each individual customer is tailored specifically to them. So each one has been looked at what their impervious area is based on the GIS map. The second piece that I want to take, and I know just because these are interrelated, is I'd like to go, well, I guess let me ask Mayor, is it okay if I talk about water and sewer now, or do you want me to wait?
Please do. Just go ahead and, absolutely.
So the next two pieces I want to focus on are water and sewer. So your water rates, and I'm not going to go through every page of this presentation that's pulled up, but a lot of detail for the water specifically is on pages 5 through 10 of this presentation. Please review those. I'm happy to answer questions. I will also be at your November 2nd meeting to answer public questions as well as council questions related to this. But I want to give you kind of the history, especially for any of the newer council members. Your last water rate increase was adopted in 2013. And that was another 4-phase rate increase. So the final phase of that rate increase was in 2017. So we're 4 years since your last kind of rate adjustment in the water utility. The prior rate increase before that, before the 2007 rate increase, was in 2006, okay? So from 2006 to at the end of the 4 phases we're looking at here, as proposed 2024, you're looking at approximately a 17-year period where you've had, in essence, 2 rate adjustments, one in 2013 and then the one we're proposing today. If you look over that 17-year period, with the rates that are being proposed today, the average residential customer would have seen their water bill go up approximately 2.5% per year over a 17-year period in terms of cost. So, as the mayor said, you're fighting somewhat of an uphill battle. You have a lot of infrastructure needs. This is a good step towards that. This doesn't solve every problem. We talked about, or the mayor talked about $100 million of identified infrastructure. This gets about a quarter of that between water, sewer, and stormwater. But it's also, we recognize, a 4-phase rate increase and a material impact to the customer's bill. But when you look at this holistically, and the mayor looked at how you compare to other communities around the state, how you compare to state averages, And if you look back almost 20 years, you've really seen on an annualized basis inflationary type rate increases, really less than inflationary type rate increases in the 2.5% range. The primary driver of the water rate increase we're talking about tonight for the 4 phases really is capital driven. A couple of years ago, you started your capital process with a bond anticipation note that was issued for approximately $4 million. So you borrowed $4 million on a short-term financing. That's a kind of a note financing to start some of these projects. We're adding an additional $6 to $7 million of projects on top of that, as well as we have to repay that short-term financing. So you're really, a couple of years ago, you did the short-term financing to buy some time, figure out the additional projects you wanted to get done, prioritize them. And now the bond we're talking about tonight will pay off that short-term financing and get you an additional $6 or $7 million for the projects the mayor's already talked about over the next 4 years. We also would want to note the issuance of that bond over a 20-year period. We're using a strategic or proposing a strategic amortization of that debt or structuring of that debt. You have some other debt outstanding in your water utility that falls off in a few years or starts to decline in a few years. We're proposing what we call a wrapped debt structure, where we take advantage of that decline in future years and debt service payments, structure the new bond around it, and it limits the rate impact. In essence, instead of stacking right on top of one another, not recognizing there's a strategic opportunity to reduce rate impact, we're taking advantage of that and structuring the bond so that your rate increase would otherwise be higher if we did not do that. So we're taking a look at really every lever we can pull to keep the rate increase as manageable as possible, phasing it in, structuring the debt, and keeping it still as manageable as we can over the four-year phase. And finally, if you take a look at the water rates only at the top of this page for the residential customer, over the 4 phases, it's about, and I'm going to round here, it's about $2 impact for every phase per month. So the average residential will see a little less than $2.21 of an increase. A year later, they'll see another about $2 increase, $2.23, 2024. The last piece that I want to talk about then is the stormwater rates. And when I'm talking about stormwater, it's very important to again recognize stormwater is the utility, sewer is the utility, and stormwater is a department within the sewage works. So you really can't talk about sewage without talking about stormwater and vice versa, especially in an older system as LaPorte has, where you have combined sewer and stormwater systems together. Historically, you've really paid for anything related to stormwater prior to a few years ago out of your sewage rates. You didn't have a stormwater rate prior, so you had stormwater issues, you had stormwater projects, you were just paying for that with sewer. A couple of years ago, the stormwater rate was instituted to help take some of that burden and help have the people really driving the stormwater pay their fair share. And that goes back to that equivalent residential unit calculation or ERU I talked about earlier. In sewer, once again, a couple of years ago, you started some of these projects. There was a $6.3 million bond anticipation note. Again, that's that short-term 3 to 5 year financing that was done to kickstart and get some of the original projects started and completed. So now you have to pay off that short-term financing. So we're sitting here with the need for at least $6 million just to pay off that short-term financing via a longer-term financing structure. But then there's an additional 12 and a half, almost $13 million of projects that are being added to that to be completed over the next 4 years as well. So that's where we come up with, and you're looking at a little less than a $20 million bond issue for the sewage works. Even though it's labeled a sewage works bond issue, it's really a combination of stormwater projects, paying off the bond anticipation note, and sewage work projects. Again, in your sewage utility, you have an opportunity to strategically structure the debt once again because you have some bonds that are rolling off in future years. And you would see that on, if you will go to Courtney, page 14, I'll just show you an example of this. It's the same situation in water and sewer, but maybe I can outline this for you. keep going. A couple more pages there, Courtney. Yep, one more. Here you go. Thank you. This is the same type of story you would see in water. This is your sewage works. This is the proposed bond that we're looking at. What you'll notice is your principal payments on a semi-annual basis due March 1st and September 1st. You'll notice they're much smaller. Actually, we don't even have any the first few years. And then they're much smaller till about 2027. And then they start escalating up. What that results in, if you look at the far right column where it says bond year total, that's your annual cost, both principal and interest on these bonds. You'll notice it starts out smaller, goes up to about $700,000 a year, then kicks into over $1.4 million a year, and then finally on 2036 kicks up to $1.8 million a year. The reason we are structuring that way is, Courtney, if you'll go to the next page, what you'll see is this page outlines at the top your outstanding debt currently. You have a 2015 bond that pays off in 2035. You have a 2017 bond that pays off next year. You have the bond anticipation note that we're paying off with these bonds. And then you have the proposed 2020 bonds that we're talking about tonight. When you overlap those 2020 bonds on top of the 15 and 17 bonds, it results in the far right column where now you will have a level debt service payment for the next 20 years of about $1.8 million. Had we not structured it that way, because with having a financial person on the council, I'm sure this is a logical question or statement that would be made. Yes, by delaying some principal, you're going to pay a little bit more in interest cost. It's a very opportune time to be borrowing, very low interest rates right now, so this is a good time to do a structure like this where you don't get penalized quite as much for pushing some principal back. But had we not structured it that way, you'd be overlapping those heavy years on the 2015 bonds. If you look at 2022 through 2027 in the far left column, you see where those years are much higher in those 2015 bonds. You would be stacking heavy debt service on top of that heavy debt service. That would result in a significantly higher rate increase need because your rates must be adopted to support your highest debt service year. So that would move your higher debt service year to hundreds of thousands of dollars higher in the years 2022 to 2028 or 27, excuse me. You'd have to set your rates higher to be able to pay those years, and then maybe you'd have a fall down in future years, but who knows if you would be able to lower rates at that point in time. Does that make sense to everyone why we're proposing the structure? It's the cheapest structure in terms of rate impact to your residents. And then finally, I also went back and I want to give the history of the sewage works, and I'll be done and happy to answer any questions. Again, you had a 2013 rate increase in your sewage works. It was the same 4-phase rate adjustment that water saw. So the final phase was enacted in 2017. So once again, it's been 4 years since your rates were last adjusted. Prior to that rate adjustment, it was the same year. It was a rate adjustment adopted back in the early 2000s with the final phase effective in 2006, like the water spread. I went back and looked over that 17-year period again, from 2007 all the way up to 2024, at the proposed rates that we're looking at for the sewage works. It's an average increase over that 17-year period of approximately 3% on the bill. Slightly higher than water, but once again, project driven. But if you look over the last 2 rate increases, 17 years, it's really in the ballpark of inflationary type raises, or inflationary type rating. I know that was a lot, Mayor, Council. I know, Nick, you're monitoring the public. I'm happy to answer any questions. Again, there's a lot of detail in this report I gave you, including a page each for water and sewer that lists out every project that's involved in these bonds and rate adjustments. But with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
And Eric, can you touch base just for the council perspective, the bonding process, briefly, how that works?
Sure, and I'll put it in, there's a lot of steps. I'll just kind of give in a nutshell. You adopt the bond ordinance, which is really the legal document giving you the authority as the city. The city council has to give the authority to issue the bonds. That's what you're going through tonight and already did with item 11 on the sewage works. The second step then is to make sure that your rate structure can support those bonds. That's what I've been talking about here. So in water, and this seems simple, maybe just for the public consumption, your water utility really operates as its own business or own enterprise unit. So water rates is all that goes to support the water utility. There's not taxes, there's not sewer rates that come over to support it or stormwater rates. Water is standalone. So your water rates have to be set to not only operate the water utility, but also pay debt service of the water utility and pay for capital improvements. It's self-contained. So we have to make sure that your water rates can support these bonds that we're talking about, as well as your operations and other capital. That's the reason for the water rate adjustment. Sewer and stormwater, same way, except since those are really combined in their own unit, you count sewer and stormwater together. But we have to ensure that those rates counted together can support the sewage works bonds that we're talking about, sewage/stormwater. So that's the point we're at tonight, Mayor, in the bonding process, is we've suggested the rates needed to support these bond paybacks. After that is done or voted upon or considered November 2nd, then the next step is we'll get a rating on these bonds, as I alluded to earlier. It'll be a separate rating for water and a separate rating for sewage. Standard & Poor's is going to look at each individually, look at their ability to pay back the debts, look at their financial health, and assign a rating. We anticipate getting that towards the latter half or the middle of November. And then at that point, and we're already working on this, as your financial advisor, Baker Tilly will put together what's called an official statement, a preliminary official statement. It contains financial data about each of the utilities, as well as general information about LaPorte as a city, LaPorte where it's located, LaPorte's financial health overall and globally, large taxpayers, large ratepayers, et cetera. We will send that to dozens and dozens of banks and underwriters that will potentially bid on these bonds. And we will tell them this is going to be a competitive bond sale, and we will set the date and the time, anticipated to be right now towards the latter half of November. And we'll say, okay, on this date at 11 a.m., send us your bids, and the lowest bid, the lowest net interest cost to the city will win. It's two separate bonds, so it could be two separate bidders that win this, but we will sell them on the same day.
Oh, a local bank could bid on this.
Yes, we have really nationally underwriters and banks that we send to as well, include local and nationally known. If you have specific banks at the local level that you want to make sure gets an opportunity for this, we're more than willing to send the same exact information to them so they can bid. Just give us that list, and we usually ask for that a couple of days before we send it out as well.
Perfect. Any questions from the council?
Who would prepare that list of local banks? Would that be the clerk treasurer?
It really can be, since this is a competitive bid, that's a great question. Since this is a competitive bid, it's really an informal process. It can come from anyone at the city, whoever you designate. If you want that to be the clerk treasurer, the mayor, if the council wants to have some feedback, we just need the list, and then we incorporate it into our kind of mass email and distribution.
Thanks.
We have a couple options, I think, locally that we'd like to include. So with that, any other questions?
Can I add one thing to that, Mayor? With our bond group, that's all they do every day, all day, is sell bonds in the market. We also will contact everyone that we send that to. So if there's specific banks you really want us to go to, tell the story, et cetera, let us know. We'll call them before the bond sale, make sure that we answer every question they have so that they can make a bid if they want.
I'm going to let Jody Lehman has something. I'll step aside so she can speak.
I don't need to be in the picture. Just so the new council knows, every bond that we've issued over the last 15 or 20 years, we always ask Baker Tilly or Bob previously to contact our local banks. We always want to give the opportunity for our local banks to be able to bid on a bond. And in fact, when we did the bonds for the new fire station, Horizon Bank was the lowest bidder for that. So we do provide them with that information, and they do follow through with that.
Thank you. Any other questions, statements?
Mayor, a couple comments on Facebook, not really directed to Eric, but maybe be answered by Jerry. Did you touch on, Jerry, the incentive to property owners to control water on their own property? Oh, you just muted, Jerry.
Sorry, there we go. No, I did not. The intent is to put to calculate those incentives in between the first rate and before going to the 100% rate. And that's quite an effort to look at all the stormwater management facilities people have on their properties. So we're going to send a mailer out saying, here's how you can manage your stormwater and save money. And in between the 50 and 100% of going to the full rate, we'll get those incentives out in front of the customers so that they can have an opportunity to tell us what they have and what they qualify for.
And I think generally, Jerry, when I've spoken with you about this, the idea is that this will be more directed at larger parcels, but can residential take advantage of that as well?
That's a good question. We have currently we do not have any incentives for residential because the 549 rate, but it might be worth looking at rain barrels and some other incentives that people could get involved with. Currently, our list does not contain that, but it would be worthy of consideration. I think so.
And
before you go, I want to bring up, because Jerry, we looked at a downtown business on Lincoln Way, retail restaurant, and based on their impervious surface, their rate was right in that $5.49 a month.
It was their roof and their sidewalk essentially covered the whole parcel, and it was about the same impervious acreage, square feet rather, as a home would have. So their bill would be very similar to a home.
So it's not guaranteeing that everybody's rates are going to blow up. That's just one example.
I also wanted to say that the stormwater fee pays for road drainage, sewer separation. When we're paving, if we fix drainage problems while we pave, our asphalt lasts a lot longer. Flood control, lake level control, and then water quality. So while there will be incentives, people or businesses benefit from all these items. So the incentives won't take the bill to zero. I just want to make sure that there is an incentive, but it's not take the bill to zero type of incentive.
So part of the reason you haven't thought about on the residential side is because the bill is it's just $549 a month, correct?
That is true. And while it's not a trivial amount of money, I know, but it also is a massive effort to start looking at individual residents for any sort of individual changes.
And again, some of this is being pushed by the EPA, correct? They're really strongly encouraging no longer doing combined sewers, correct? I think you touched on it.
They are. We're lucky that we have very few overflows because of our 2006 combined sewer overflow project. So we're not under the gun. A lot of communities have legal agreements with the EPA where they have to spend so many dollars a year toward lowering their overflows. So we're not under a legal gun to do it, which is really nice. We can take our time and do it well and not hurt everyone with rates. If you look at some of the area cities, especially cities with rivers flowing through them like South Bend and Mishawaka, they have enormous projects that they're phasing in under legal penalty if they don't follow. Their rates are going to get very high in the short term. So Porte is lucky. We can take our time and fix our drainage and our sewer backup problems without being under the thumb of the EPA, but we still need to do it.
And one of the you talk about when we're doing road improvements, Indiana Ave is a state highway. That's not our road, but that's going to be redone by the state here, and you're going to take advantage of that being opened up to do some separation. Is that correct?
Absolutely. If you recall, when Monroe Street was reconstructed, we separated sewers on Monroe Street. There was a 60-inch storm sewer built to collect all the drainage and some of the drainage on the corridor. The same sort of thing is going to go on Indiana Avenue. We'll build a storm sewer, separate sewers. There's sanitary sewer problem on Indiana Avenue too. So that and water issues, old water pipes Tim could probably address. But so we'll replace the infrastructure under Indiana Avenue when the state reconstructs it. And as you said, 2025. If you look at our project list, that's built into the rates. We get a pretty decent deal on that because there's a kind of a stop loss in the state law structure that once our costs go up so high, they're capped as a city, so we get a pretty good bang for the buck on that kind of project.
Indiana Ave is really a good. There's a lot of lead lines on Indiana Ave too, so that project will also remove a lot of lead lines, service lines going down that route also.
Any other questions from council or anybody from the public? Nick?
Nope.
Hey, Jared, do you know approximately how many commercial properties meet the 150 ERU standard or size?
I don't get that number. I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I can certainly get that for you.
Any other questions?
I found this on the web.
Okay, we'll move on. Councilwoman Ficus, introduction of an ordinance.
Your Honor, I move to introduce an ordinance read for the first time in its entirety.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor state by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Carries 7-0. Councilwoman Ficus.
An ordinance establishing an initial rate for city sewer services for the purpose of stormwater management. Whereas the city of LaPorte, Indiana, city, now owns and operates a sewage works system in accordance with provisions of Indiana Code 36-9-23 and the following Act. And whereas the Common Council is responsible for establishing, reviewing, and revising rates for these services. And whereas the Common Council finds that in order to address stormwater needs, provisions must be made to study, design, and implement a system for the safe and efficient disposition of city stormwater, and that funds may be made available for such purpose. And whereas the Stormwater Department is a division of the LaPorte Sewage Works as defined in Indiana Code 36-9-1-8. And whereas the Common Council finds, based upon the advice of its council, that the provisions of the Act apply to the collection, disposal, and drainage of storm and surface water and relieving sanitary sewers of such water, that the city may finance its stormwater system pursuant to the Act, and that the Common Council may supervise and control said stormwater system pursuant to the Act, and that the provisions of the Act will enable the city to finance, operate, and control its stormwater system. And whereas the Common Council wishes to establish a stormwater division of the sewage works, a stormwater fund for receiving stormwater revenue, and a system of stormwater rates and charges. Now therefore be it ordained by the Common Council of the City of LaPorte, Indiana. Section 1. For purposes of this ordinance, an equivalent residential unit, ERU, is defined as the amount of impervious area included upon an average residential property. An impervious area refers to those surface areas of residential and non-residential properties which water will not penetrate and from which stormwater runoff will be produced. An impervious area of not more than 3,000 square feet shall constitute one ERU. Section 2, definitions. For the purposes of this schedule, the following terms shall have the specified meaning. A, Class 1, any parcel existing in the city considered to be agricultural or residential, includes duplexes, triplexes, mobile homes, and condominiums. B, Class 2, any parcel existing in the city considered to be railroad parcels or unimproved parcels. Unimproved parcels include, but are not limited to, unimproved agricultural parcels, unimproved residential parcels, unimproved commercial parcels, unimproved industrial parcels, unimproved tax-exempt parcels, unimproved municipal parcels, and unimproved utility parcels. C, Class 3, all parcels not encompassed within the definitions of Class 1 and Class 2. This includes, but is not necessarily limited to, commercial parcels, industrial parcels, tax-exempt parcels, municipal parcels, and utility parcels. Section 3. Ordinance number 27-2013 and subsequent ordinances of the City of LaPorte regarding the municipal sewage works is hereby amended to make provisions for a monthly stormwater fee. The monthly stormwater fee is to be paid by each user and shall be paid according to the following schedule. Type of property, Class 1. Number of ERUs, 1.00. Monthly fee per ERU, Phase 1, $5.49. Phase 2, $5.49. Total monthly fee, $5.49, both phases. Type of property, class 2. Number of ERUs, 0.33. Monthly fee per ERU, phase 1, $5.49. Phase 2, $5.49. Total monthly fee, 1.81 for both phases. Type of property, class 3. Number of ERUs, 1 ERU for every 3,000 square feet of impervious area. Monthly fee per ERU, phase 1, $2.75. Phase 2, $5.49. Total monthly fee, variable, but not less than $2.75 and $5.49. Phase 1, effective 1/1/2021. Phase 2, effective 1/1/2022. Section 4, rates and charges incurred under this ordinance shall be prepared and collected by the city in accordance with those provisions regulating the preparation and issuance of bills for sewer service generally. The monies collected under this ordinance shall be deposited in the Stormwater Revenue Fund hereby created. Section 5, this ordinance shall be in full force and effective upon adoption. End of ordinance.
Thank you. Before we go to any council comment, Eric Walsh, would you like to make any comments?
Sure. This is just the stormwater piece, as we talked about. The residential rate, or the class 1, and then the class 2, which is really unimproved properties, agricultural, is not changing from what is already the rate of $5.49. The only rate changing is the class 3, which is the non-residential. And again, we're phasing them back to the rates that were originally adopted a couple of years ago, over 2 years.
And again, yes, that's the key. And residents, the key point is residents aren't moving, aren't changing, and we're splitting that class 3 rate between 2021 and 2022. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move this to the November 2nd meeting. Councilman Vincent, introduction of an ordinance.
Honorable Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to introduce an ordinance establishing water rates read for the first time in its entirety this evening.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor state by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Councilman Vincent.
An ordinance establishing water rates and charges and system development charges for water service in the city of LaPorte. Whereas pursuant to Indiana Code Article 8-1.5, the Act, the city of LaPorte, LaPorte County, Indiana, the city, owns, operates, manages, and controls a water system. And whereas the Common Council now finds that the existing rates and charges for use of and services rendered by the water utility of said city are too low and not adequate to provide sufficient funds to maintain the utility property in sound physical and financial condition to render adequate and efficient services and to service outstanding revenue bonds. And whereas Indiana Code 8-1.5-3-8C requires that all rates be reasonable and charges for service must provide sufficient revenue to pay maintenance costs, operating charges, upkeep, repairs, depreciation, interest charges on bonds and other obligations, provide for a sinking fund, provide for debt service reserve for bonds and other obligations, provide for payment of any lease, provide money for adequate working capital, provide money for making extensions and replacements to the extent not provided for through depreciation, and money provided for payment of taxes that may be assessed against the utility. All rates and charges must produce an income sufficient to maintain the utility property in a sound physical and financial condition to render adequate and efficient service. And whereas the Common Council of the City of LaPorte now determines that the rates and charges for the use of and services rendered by the municipality-owned water utility should be sufficient to include a reasonable return on the utility plant in service, should include an amount sufficient to compensate the city for taxes, which would otherwise be due to the city and which would be paid on the utility property in service where privately owned. And whereas
there is a need to provide an ongoing capital improvement and maintenance program within the Porte water utility. And whereas the city's existing schedules of rates and charges for water service contains a new custom capping fee and service development charge, and more particularly described in prior ordinances of the Common Council, to be paid by new customers of the water system. And whereas existing customers have, through rates and charges, paid for the capital cost of the water system, and whereas it is necessary and advisable for new customers to pay upon connection a fee by which they can pay their proportionate share paid by or on behalf of the existing customers, so as to finance further improvements and extensions to the water system and other lawful revenue requirements. And whereas the Common Council of the City of LaPorte, Indiana hereby determines that the following water rates and charges are in the best interest of the public served by the water utility. Now therefore be it ordained by the Common Council of the City of LaPorte, Indiana. Section 1, that the following schedules of rates and charges are hereby adopted and approved and are the best interest of the public served by the City of LaPorte, Indiana. See attached Exhibit A. I'll come back to that in just a second. Section 2, that pursuant to Indiana Code 8-1.5-3-8.1, a public hearing on rates and charges is now scheduled for the second day of November 2020 at 6 p.m. at the LaPorte Council Chambers, 801 Michigan Avenue, LaPorte, Indiana. The clerk treasurer will provide notice of such hearing pursuant to statute and will make all documents concerning such rate increases with the need for such rate increases available for inspection at the office of the clerk treasurer. Section 3, all ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith are hereby repealed. Section 4, that this ordinance shall be in full force and effect from and after its passage and signed by the mayor. All right, I'm going to go to attachment A. LaPorte, Indiana Municipal Water Utility Schedules for Water Rates and Charges, Phases 1, 2, 3, and 4. Schedule of water rates and charges. Metered user block schedule, all users. Outside corporate city boundary rates and charges are approximately 14.9% higher than the rates and charges for customers inside the city corporate boundaries. Inside corporate city boundaries. Gallons per month. The effective date will be 1/1. Gallons per month, effective date for the first 5,000 gallons. Rate per 1,000 gallons, effective 1/1/2021, is $3.60. For the next 10,000 gallons, it's $3.30. For the next 35,000 gallons, it's $3.08. For the next 50,000 gallons, it's $2.56, and over 100,000 gallons, it's $1.97. The rate per 1,000 gallons went into effect on January 1st of 2022. For the first 5,000 gallons, it's $3.92. For the next 10,000 gallons, it's $3.60. For the next 35,000 gallons, it's $3.36. For the next 50,000 gallons, it's $2.79. And over 100,000 gallons, it's $2.15. The rate per 1,000 gallons going into effect January 1st, 2023. For the first 5,000 gallons, it's $4.27. For the next 10,000 gallons, it's $3.92. For the next 35,000 gallons, it's $3.66. For the next 50,000 gallons, it's $3.04. And over 100,000 gallons, it's $2.34. And the final rate per 1,000 gallons going into effect on January 1st of 2024. For the first 5,000 gallons, it's $4.65. For the next 10,000 gallons, it's $4.27. For the next 35,000 gallons, it's $3.99. For the next 50,000 gallons, it's $3.31. Over 100,000 gallons, it's $2.55. Minimum charges per month. Each user shall pay a minimum charge in accordance with the following applicable size of meter installed, for which the user will be entitled to a quantity of water set out on the above schedule. on all metered water services. Inside the corporate city boundaries, meter size, effective date, January 1st of 2021, the meter size of 5/8 inch, 5,000 gallons, minimum monthly is $18. For a 3/4 inch meter size, that corresponds to 7,000 gallons, the minimum monthly payment is $24.60. For a meter size of 1 inch, it corresponds to 13,000 gallons, the minimum monthly payment is $44.40. For a meter size of 1.5 inches, that corresponds to 28,000 gallons. The minimum monthly payment would be $91.04. For a 2-inch meter size, it corresponds to 42,000 gallons. The minimum monthly payment will be $134.16. For a 3-inch meter size corresponding to 85,000 gallons, the minimum monthly will be $248.40. For a 4-inch meter size corresponding to 175,000 gallons, the minimum monthly will be $434.55. For a 6-inch meter size corresponding to 390,000 gallons, the minimum monthly payment will be $858.10. For an 8-inch meter size corresponding to 600,000 gallons, the minimum monthly payment will be $1,271.80. All right, the minimum monthly payments going into effect on January 1st of 2022. For a 5/8 inch meter, it's $19.60. For a 3/4 inch meter, it's $26.80. For a 1-inch meter, it's $48.40. For a 1.5 inch meter, it's $99.28. For a 2-inch meter, it's $146.32. For a 3-inch meter, it's $270.85. For a 4-inch meter, it's $473.95. For the 6-inch meter, it's $936.20. For the 8-inch meter, it's $1,387.70. Minimum monthly is going into effect January 1st of 2023. For a 5/8 inch meter, it is $21.35. For a 3/4 inch meter, $29.19. For a 1-inch meter, $52.71. For a 1.5 inch meter, it's $108.13. For a 2-inch meter, $159.37. For a 3-inch meter, it's $295.05. For a 4-inch meter, it's $516.15. For a 6-inch meter, it's $1,019.25. For an 8-inch meter, it's $1,510.65. Monthly minimums going into effect on January 1st of 2024. For a 5/8 inch meter, it's $23.25. For a 3/4 inch meter, it is $31.79. For a 1-inch meter, it is $57.41. For a 1.5 inch meter, it's $117.82. For a 2-inch meter, it's $173.68. For a 3-inch meter, it's $321.45. For a 4-inch meter, it's $562.35. For a 6-inch meter, it's $1,110.60. For an 8-inch meter, it's $1,646.10. Multiple dwelling units. The minimum charge for multiple dwelling units served by 1 meter connection having 5 or more family units shall not be less than that shown in the table directly below this paragraph for each dwelling unit served by such connection. Provided, however, that the monthly minimum charge calculated for the foregoing method shall not be less than the published minimum charge above for such size meter. Inside the corporate city boundaries, multiple dwelling charge effective January 1st of 2021, $13.49. Effective January 1st of 2022, $14.70. Effective January 1st of 2023, $16.02. Effective January 1st of 2024, $17.64. Public fire protection, public hydrants, charges for production, storage, transmission, and delivery of water for public fire protection purposes shall be billed in accordance with the following schedule. The inside corporate city boundaries charges, monthly charges going into effect January 1st of 2021. Meter size 5/8 inch, $2.21. Three quarter inch size meter, $2.21. 1 inch meter, $5.51. 1 1/2 inch meter, $12.44. 2 inch meter, $22.02. 3 inch meter, $51.27. 4 inch meter, $87.90. 6 inch meter, $197.82. Monthly charge going into effect January 1st, 2022. 5/8 inch meter is $2.41. 3/4 inch meter, $2.41. 1 inch meter, $6.03. 1 1/2 inch meter, $13.56. 2 inch meter, $24. 3 inch meter, $55.88. 4 inch meter, $95.81. 6 inch meter, $215.62. Monthly charges going into effect January 1st of 2023. 5/8 inch meter, $2.63. 3/4 inch meter, $2.63. 1 inch meter, $6.57. 1 1/2 inch meter, $14.78. 2 inch meter, $26.16. 3 inch meter, $60.91. 4 inch meter, $104.43. 6 inch meter, $235.03. Monthly charge going into effect January 1st of 2024. For 5/8 inch meter, $2.87. For the 3/4 inch meter, $2.87. For the 1 inch meter, $7.16. For the 1 1/2 inch meter, $16.11. For the 2 inch meter, $28.51. For the 3 inch meter, $66.39. For the 4 inch meter, $113.83. For the 6 inch meter, $256.18. Private fire protection inside the corporate city boundaries. This table, the annual charge going into effect January 1st of 2021 per hydrant, $527.54. The annual charge going into effect January 1st of 2022, $575.02. The annual charge going into effect January 1st of 2023, $626.77. The annual charge going into effect January 1st of 2024, $683.18. Fire sprinkler systems, the inside corporate city boundaries, the connection size, annual charge going into effect January 1st of 2021, connection size on a 2 inch line, that's $392. On a 3 inch line, it's $779. On a 4 inch line, it's $1,172. On a 6 inch line, it's $1,564. On an 8 inch line, it's $1,951. On a 10 inch line, it's $2,344. Annual charges going into effect January 1st of 2022. Fire sprinkler system on a 2 inch line is $427.
Councilman Vincent, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just confirmed with Attorney Otis, and we had you reading information that wasn't necessary as a part of this. Nick, it's okay if we stop at the now therefore to be ordained.
Correct. Yeah.
So I'm sorry. Unless you would like to keep reading, Councilman.
No, I am perfectly fine right there.
All right, so we do have this ordinance. Is there any discussion? Eric Walsh, before we move, would you like to make any statement regarding this ordinance?
Sure. This, just to recap, when I went through that summary page, this is the water rates, again, primarily capital driven. Also, the bond issue that we're gearing up for is driving this. It's a 4-phase rate increase to the average residential customer, assuming 4,000 gallons per month. It's approximately $2 per phase in terms of an increase.
Any discussion?
Just real quick, Mayor, of course, there's different rates, and I think Councilman Vincent touched on this. There's different rates for individuals outside city limits that receive city utilities. Those rates are 15% higher. The reason for that is that they are capped by state statute at 15% higher. The city can't charge higher than that. And so this is the decision, of course, of the mayor, and certainly be up for the vote of the council, that the individuals that receive the utilities but don't pay the taxes, the local property taxes, will pay a higher utility rate.
But this is also currently, if somebody can be annexed, they must commit to being annexed first. And if they are outside the annexation area, they have to sign a waiver that when it reaches their point when they could be annexed, they have to sign that as well, and they can't fight annexation.
Mayor, that's an item on the agenda, item 19.
Correct. So with that, any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll move that ordinance to the November 2nd meeting. We just wanted to watch Councilman Vincent go for a while.
Yeah, thanks for saving me there.
Item number 14, Councilwoman Cutler, and again, you don't need to extend the numbers throughout all those costs and so forth. You can edit page 1.
I can end at page 1. Oh, that is fantastic. Okay. Your Honor, I move to introduce an ordinance for the first reading in its entirety.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion. Hearing none. Those in favor state by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Councilwoman Cutler.
Ordinance establishing user charges and rates and capital cost charges and system development charges for sewage service in the city of LaPorte. Whereas pursuant to Indiana Code Section 36-9-23-1 and what follows the Act, the City of LaPorte County, Indiana, the city owns, operates, manages, and controls a sewage collection system, the sewage system. And whereas the Common Council now finds that the existing rates and charges for the use of and services rendered by the sewer utility of the city are low and not adequate to provide sufficient funds to maintain the utility. And whereas the Act requires that all rates be reasonable and charges for service must produce sufficient revenue to pay maintenance costs, operating charges, upkeep, repairs, depreciation, interest charges on bonds or other obligations, provide for a sinking fund, provide for a debt service reserve for bonds or other obligations, provide for payment of any lease, provide money for adequate working capital, provide money for making extensions and replacements to the extent not provided for through depreciation, and provide money for the payment of taxes that may be assessed against the utility. And whereas there is a need to provide for ongoing capital improvement and maintenance within the City of Porte wastewater utility. And whereas the city's existing schedule of rates and charges for sewer service contains a sewage treatment capacity charge, as more particularly described in prior ordinances of the Common Council, which is a one-time fee paid by new customers of the sewage system to provide physical access to the system. And whereas existing customers have, through rates and charges, paid for the capital costs of the sewage system, and where it is necessary and advisable for new customers to pay, upon connection, an additional fee by which they can pay their proportionate share paid by or on behalf of existing customers so as to finance further improvements and extensions to the sewer system and other lawful revenue requirements. Whereas the Common Council of the City of LaPorte, Indiana, hereby determined that the following is to promote the public health, safety, prosperity, aesthetics, and general welfare of the citizens of the City of LaPorte, and is designed to establish increased charges and rates. Now therefore be ordained by the Common Council of the City of LaPorte, Indiana. So, end of ordinance at this point?
End of ordinance, yes. And before discussion, I'll let Eric Walsh again from Baker Tilly add any points there.
Thank you, Mayor. This again is the sewer rates portion of what I talked about earlier. This is again a 4-phased rate increase. Unlike water, it's not quite uniform over the 4 phases due to some additional capital needs and really immediate capital needs on wastewater. It's a little bit more front-loaded of a rate phase in. So the same average residential customer, assuming 4,000 gallons of water usage a month, would see in phase 1 a little bit over a $3 increase, and then in phases 2, 3, and 4, it's approximately $1 increase in each of those phases. So a little over 3 on the first phase, and $1 each of the next 3 phases. Great impact.
Any other discussion, questions?
The public, Mayor, all of the attachments and addendums are posted online, where you can find the agendas and other supportive documentation on the City of LaPorte's website.
Thank you, Clerk Treasurer Parthone. All right, we'll move that to the November 2nd meeting. Councilman Frankie, introduction of an ordinance.
Your Honor, I move to introduce an ordinance amending ordinance number 5-2018 of the City of LaPorte.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Councilman Frankie.
An ordinance amending ordinance number 5-2018 of the City of LaPorte relating to the issuance of waterworks revenue bonds and all matters related thereto. Whereas the City of LaPorte, Indiana, the city, has heretofore established and constructed and currently owns and operates a municipal waterworks utility system, the Waterworks, pursuant to the provisions of Indiana Code 8-1.5 as amended, the Act, and whereas the Common Council of the City, the Common Council, on February 20th, 2018, adopted its ordinance number 5-2018, ordinance number 5-2018, authorizing the issuance of waterworks revenue bonds, the bonds, to finance the costs of certain improvements to the waterworks of the city, the project, in an amount to not exceed $6 million and having a final maturity date not later than 21 years after the issuance of the bonds. And whereas the Common Council has determined to increase the maximum authorized principal amount of the bonds to $8,500,000 to extend the permissible final maturity date of the bonds and to deem all references to H.J. Umbaugh under ordinance number 5-2018 as referring to Baker Tilly Municipal Advisors. Now, therefore, be it ordained by the Common Council of the City of LaPorte, Indiana, as follows. Section 1, Amendments, Ordinance number 5-2018, is hereby amended to A, increase the maximum authorized principal amount of the bonds to $8,500,000, and B, provide that the final maturity date of the bonds shall be not later than 25 years after the date of issuance of the bonds. And C, provide that all references to H.J. Umbaugh shall be deemed to refer to Baker Tilly Municipal Advisors. Section 3, Effectiveness. The provisions of this ordinance shall take effect and be in full force and effect from and after passage and adoption by the Common Council of the City of LaPorte, LaPorte County, Indiana, in conformance with applicable law. End of ordinance.
So before we move forward, Eric Walsh, Baker Tilly, any brief comments?
Once again, similar to the sewage bond ordinance amendment, again, increasing the size a little bit for the last 2 years. Additional projects have been identified, cost has increased, and also, unlike the sewage works, the water needs an amendment for the final maturity. The prior water bond ordinance had a little bit more restrictive covenants, and we wouldn't have been able to do a full 20-year bond if we did not amend this.
So do we have a motion to suspend the rules?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to suspend the rules. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion to suspend the rules passes. We have a motion for a second reading.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor state by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes to second reading by title only. Councilman Frankie.
An ordinance amending ordinance number 5-2018 of the City of LaPorte relating to the issuance of waterworks revenue bonds and all matters related thereto.
Do I have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion to adopt and a second. Discussion?
I'm abstaining from this as well. For all voting.
Councilwoman Brown will abstain. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor state by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Councilman Vincent, and before we start, just understand you only have till page 9. Because you drew the short end of the stick tonight. Do I have a motion?
Honorable Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to introduce an ordinance read in its entirety to page 9.
Second.
First time.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Councilman Vincent.
This is an ordinance of the City of LaPorte, Indiana, authorizing the issuance of bonds for the purpose of providing funds to refund the city's general obligation bonds, Series 2012, and pay incidental expenses in connection therewith, and on account of the issuance of the bonds and appropriating the proceeds thereof. Whereas the City of LaPorte, Indiana is a governmental unit and a political subdivision of the state of Indiana, the city. And whereas pursuant to ordinance number 21-2012, adopted by the Common Council of the city on December 3rd, 2012, the 2012 ordinance, the city issued the City of LaPorte, Indiana General Obligation Bonds, Series 2012, the 2012 bonds, and the original principal amount of $4,750,000 for the purpose of providing for the payment of cost of construction of various capital projects in the city and the cost of selling and issuing the 2012 bonds. And whereas $4,255,000 aggregate principal amount of the 2012 bonds is currently outstanding, and whereas the 2012 ordinance provides that if irrevocable instructions to call the 2012 bonds for redemption shall be given, and 1, sufficient monies, or 2, direct non-callable obligations of, or obligations the principal on and interest of which are unconditionally guaranteed by the United States of America, the principal of the interest on which, when due, will provide sufficient monies, or 3, any combination of number 1 or 2 above, which when due will provide sufficient money to pay the whole amount of the principal of and interest on, and the premium, if any, due and payable upon the 2012 bonds then outstanding, shall be held in trust for such purpose, and provisions shall also be made for paying all fees and expenses for the redemption. Then and in such event, the 2012 bonds shall no longer be deemed outstanding or entitled to the pledge of sources of repayment described in the 2012 ordinance. And whereas the 2012 bonds maturing on or after July 1st of 2021 are redeemable at the option of the city, in whole or in part, on January 1st, 2021, and in a date thereafter, in any order of maturity or maturities selected by the city, and by lot within any maturity at a redemption price equal to the principal amount of each 2012 bond that to be redeemed, plus accrued interest to the redemption date. And whereas Indiana Code 5-1-5-1 provides for the Common Council may by ordinance provide for the issuance of bonds to refund outstanding bonds issued at any time by the city, and to pay redemption premiums and costs of refunding to the effect a savings to the city. Whereas the city desires to authorize the issuance of the City of LaPorte, Indiana General Obligation Refunding Bond Series 2020, the 2020 bond, in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $4,475,000, the authorized amount, for the purpose of refunding all of the outstanding 2012 bonds outstanding, the refunded 2012 bonds, including the payment of any redemption premiums and costs of such refunding, the payment of accrued interest on the 2020 bonds, if any, and the payment of cost of issuance of the 2020 bonds, and any other fees and charges associated with the issuance of the 2020 bonds, including the payment of any fees, charges associated with obtaining credit enhancement for the 2020 bonds. And whereas the original principal amount on the 2020 bonds, together with the outstanding principal amount of the previously issued bonds, which constitute a debt of the city, is no more than 2% of 1/3 of the total net assessed valuation of the city. And whereas, under the governing statutes, it is necessary to make an appropriation to refund the 2012 bonds with the 2020 bonds, and it has been determined that said appropriation shall be made at this time. And whereas notice has been given and this date of public hearing has been conducted regarding such appropriations as required by Indiana law. And whereas all conditions precedent to the adoption of this ordinance authorizing the issuance of the 2020 bonds has been complied with in accordance with Indiana Code 36-4-6-19 and Indiana Code 5-1-5-1 and other applicable provisions of the Indiana Code, known as the Act. Now, therefore, be it ordained by the Common Council of the City of LaPorte, Indiana, as follows. Section 1, refunding, authorization of the bonds and appropriate proceeds. So the Common Council, after consideration of the estimate and known interest payable on the fixed maturities of the 2012 bonds and interest payable to refund 2012 bonds and the cost of issuance of 2020 bonds, including any sale discount, redemption premiums, if any, to be paid, and the probable earned income from the investment of the proceeds of the 2020 bonds, pending redemption of the refund 2012 bonds, hereby determines that a savings to the city will be affected by such refinancing. In order to provide for the refinancing of the refunded 2012 bonds and the cost of selling and issuing the 2020 bonds, including the cost of obtaining bond insurance, ratings, and other credit enhancements, the city shall borrow money and shall issue the 2020 bonds as herein authorized. The city covenants that the proceeds from the 2020 bonds will be used for any purpose except as described in this ordinance. An appropriation in any amount not to exceed the authorized amount, together with all investments, earnings thereon, shall be made to pay for the governmental purpose to be financed by the 2020 bonds. And the fund shall meet said appropriation shall be provided out of the proceeds of the 2020 bonds with the original principal amount of not to exceed the authorized amount in such investment earnings. That appropriation shall be in addition to all other appropriations provided for the existing budget and tax levy. Section 2, general terms of the bonds. Issuance A, issuance of the 2020 bonds. In order to procure said loan for such purposes, the city hereby authorizes the issuance of the 2020 bonds as described herein. The clerk treasurer, as the fiscal officer of the city, is hereby authorized and directed to have prepared and to issue to sell the 2020 bonds as negotiable, fully registered bonds of the city in the amount not to exceed the authorized amount. The 2020 bonds shall be executed in the name of the city by the manual or facsimile signature of this mayor of the city and attested by the manual or facsimile signature of the clerk treasurer, who shall affix the seal of the city to each of the 2020 bonds manually, or shall have the seal imprinted or impressed thereon by facsimile or other means. In case any officer whose signature appears on the 2020 bonds shall cease to have such officer before the delivery of the 2020 bonds, such signature shall nevertheless be valid and sufficient for all purposes as if such officer had remained in office until delivery thereof. The 2020 bonds also shall be and will not be valid or become obligatory for any purpose or entitled to any benefit under the ordinance unless and until authenticated by the manual signature of the registrar as defined in section 4 hereof, subject to the provisions of the ordinance regarding for the registration of the 2020 bonds. The 2020 bonds shall be fully negotiable instruments under the law of the state of Indiana. The 2020 bonds shall be numbered consecutively from R-1 up, shall be issued in denominations of $5,000 or any integral multiple thereof, or such higher denominations as the clerk treasurer shall determine prior to the issuance of the 2020 bonds. Shall be originally dated as of the date of the issuance and shall bear interest payable semi-annually on the January 1 and July 1, commencing not earlier than January 1, 2021, at a rate or rates not exceeding 4% per annum. The exact rate and rates to be determined by negotiation pursuant to Section 6 of this ordinance, calculated on the basis of a 360-day year comprised of 12 30-day months. The bonds shall mature on the dates and shall be issued in the principal amounts as applicable, as determined by the clerk, treasurer, and mayor, provided by the original aggregate principal amount does not exceed the authorized amount, and that the first maturity shall be no earlier than January 1, 2021, and that the final maturity shall be no later than January 1, 2032. B. Source of payment. The 2020 bonds are as to all the principal thereof, and as to all interest due thereon, general obligations of the city payable from ad valorem property taxes on all tax property within the city. Section C. Payments. All payments of interest on the 2020 bonds shall be paid by check or draft mailed 1 business day prior to the interest payment date to the registered owners thereof as of the 15th day of the month preceding the interest payment date, known as the record date, at the address as they appear on the registration and transfer book of the city kept for the purposes by the registrar, the registration book, or as such other address as is provided to the paying agent as defined in Section 4 hereof, in writing by such registered owner. Each registered owner of $1 million or more in principal amount of the 2020 bond shall be entitled to receive interest payments by wire transfer by providing written wire instructions to the paying agent before the record date for any payment. All payments of the principal of and premium, if any, on the 2020 bond shall be made under surrender thereof at the principal office of the paying agent in any coin or currency of the United States of America, which on the date of such payment shall be legal tender for the payment of public and private debts, or in the case of the registered owner of $1 million or more in principal amount of the 2020 bonds, by wire transfer on the due date upon written direction of such owner provided at least 15 days prior to the maturity date. Interest on the 2020 bond shall be payable from the interest payment date to which the interest has been paid next preceding the authentication date thereof, unless such 2020 bonds are authenticated after the record date for an interest payment and on or before such interest payment dates, in which case they shall bear interest from such interest payment date, or unless authenticated on or before the record date for the first interest payment date, in which case they shall bear interest from the original date until the principal shall be fully paid. Section D, transfer and exchange. Each 2020 bond shall be transferable or exchangeable only upon the registration record by the registered owner thereof in writing, or by the registered owner's attorney duly authorized in writing, upon surrender of such 2020 bonds together with a written instrument of transfer or exchange satisfactory to the registrar duly executed by the registered owner or such attorney, and thereupon a new fully registered bond or bonds in the same aggregate principal amount and of the same maturity shall be executed and delivered in the name of the transferee or transferees of the registered owner, as the case may be, and exchange therefore. The cost for such transfer or exchange shall be borne by the city, except for any tax or governmental charge required to be paid in connection therewith, which shall be payable to the owner requesting such transfer or exchange. The city, the registrar, and the paying agents may treat and consider the persons in whose names such 2020 bonds are registered as the absolute owners thereof, for all purposes, including for the purpose of receiving payment of or on account of the principal thereof and interest due thereon. Section E, wrongfully stolen of lost, stolen, or destroyed bonds. And in the event of any 2020 bond being mutilated, lost, stolen, or destroyed, the city may execute and the registrar may authenticate a new bond of like date, maturity, and denominations as that mutilated, lost, stolen, or destroyed, which new bond shall be marked in the manner to distinguish it from the bond for which it was issued, provided that in the case of any mutilated bond, such mutilated bond shall first be surrendered to the registrar, and in the case of any lost, stolen, or destroyed bonds, that shall be first furnished by the registrar's evidence as such loss, theft, or destruction satisfactory to the clerk treasurer and the registrar, together with indemnities satisfactory to them. In the event any such bond shall have matured, instead of issuing a duplicate bond, the city and the registrar may, upon receiving indemnity satisfactory to them, pay the same without surrender thereof. The city and the registrar may charge the owner for such 2020 bonds with their reasonable fees and expenses in this connection. Any 2020 bond issued pursuant to this paragraph shall be deemed an original, substitute contractual obligations of the city, whether or not the lost, stolen, or destroyed 2020 bond shall be found at any time, and shall be entitled to all of the benefits of this ordinance, equally or proportionally with any and all other 2020 bonds issued hereunder. Section 3, Terms of Redemption. The mayor and the clerk treasurer, upon consultation with the city's financial advisor, may designate maturities of the 2020 bonds or portions thereof in integral multiples of authorized denomination, and shall be subject to the optional redemption and or maturity sinking fund redemption and the corresponding redemption dates, amounts, and prices, including premium, if any. Except as otherwise set forth in this ordinance, the mayor and the clerk treasurer, upon consultation with the city's financial advisor, is hereby authorized and directed to determine the terms governing any such redemption as evidenced by the delivery of the 2020 bond. Notice of redemption shall be mailed by first-class mail or by registered or certified mail to the address of each registered owner of a 2020 bond to be redeemed as shown on the registration record not more than 60 days and not less than 30 days prior to the dates fixed for redemption, except to the extent such redemption notice is waived by the owners of the 2020 bonds redeemed, provided, however, that failure to give such notice by mailing or any defect therein with respect to any 2020 bond shall not affect the validity of any proceedings or the redemption of any other 2020 bond. The notice shall specify the date and place for the redemption price, and the CUSIP numbers of the 2020 bonds called for redemption. The place of redemption may be determined by the clerk treasurer. Interest on the 2020 bonds show called for redemption shall cease on the redemption date fixed, and such notice if sufficient funds are available at the place of redemption to pay the redemption price on the date so named. And thereafter, such 2020 bonds shall no longer be protected by this ordinance and shall not be deemed to be outstanding hereunder, and the holders thereof shall have the right only to receive the redemption price. If any 2020 bond is issued as a term bond, the paying agent shall credit against the mandatory sinking fund requirement for the 2020 bond maturing as a term bond and corresponding mandatory redemption obligation in the order determined by the city. Any 2020 bonds maturing as term bonds maturing on the same date which have previously been redeemed, otherwise than as a result of the previous mandatory redemption requirement, or delivered to the registrar for cancellation or purchase for cancellation by the paying agent, and not theretofore applied as a credit against any redemption obligation. Each 2020 bond maturing for a term period so delivered or canceled shall be credited by the paying agent at 100% of the principal amount thereof against the mandatory sinking fund obligation on such mandatory sinking fund date, and any excess of such amount shall be credited on future redemption obligations. The principal amount of the 2020 bonds and the redeemed by operation of the mandatory sinking fund requirement shall be accordingly reduced. provided, however, the paying agent shall credit such 2020 bonds maturing as term bonds only to the extent received on or before the date 45 days preceding the applicable mandatory redemption date. All bonds which have been redeemed shall be canceled and shall not be reissued, provided, however, that one or more new registered bonds shall be issued for the unredeemed portion of any 2020 bond without charge to the holder thereof. No later than the date fixed for redemption, funds shall be deposited with the paying agent or another paying agent to pay, and such agent is hereby authorized and directed to apply for such funds for the payment of the 2020 bond or portions thereof called for redemption, including accrued interest thereon to the redemption date. No payment shall be made upon any 2020 bond or portion thereof called for redemption, and such bonds have been delivered for payment or cancellation, or the registrar shall have received the items required by this ordinance with respect to any mutilated, lost, stolen, or destroyed bond. Section 4. Appointment of registrar and paying agent. The clerk treasurer is hereby initially appointed to serve as registrar and paying agent for the 2020 bonds. The clerk treasurer shall have the option of appointing a successor registrar and paying agent at any time, together with any successor, the registrar or paying agent. The registrar is hereby charged with the responsibility of authenticating the 2020 bonds and shall keep and maintain the registration record at its office. The mayor and clerk treasurer are hereby authorized to enter into such agreements or understandings with any institution hereafter serving in such capacities as it will enable the institution to perform the services required of the registrar and paying agent. The clerk treasurer is authorized to pay such fees as the institution may charge for the services it provides as registrar or paying agent. The registrar and paying agent may at any time resign as registrar and paying agent by giving 30 days written notice by first-class mail to the clerk treasurer and to each registered owner of the 2020 bonds then outstanding. And such registration will take effect at the end of such 30 days or upon the earlier appointment of a successor registrar and paying agent by the clerk treasurer. Such notice to the clerk treasurer may be served personally or sent by registered mail. The registrar and paying agent may be removed at any time as registrar and paying agent by the clerk treasurer, in which event the clerk treasurer may appoint a successor registrar and paying agent. The clerk treasurer shall notify each registered owner of the 2020 bonds by them outstanding by first-class mail of the removal of the registrar and paying agent. Notices to registered owners of the 2020 bonds shall be deemed to be given when mailed by first-class mail to the address of such registered owners as they appear on the registration record. Any predecessor registrar or paying agent shall deliver all 2020 bonds, cash related thereto, in its possession, and the registered record to the successor registrar and paying agent. At all times, the same entity shall serve as registrar and as paying agent. Section 5. Form of bonds, book entry form. The form and tenor of the 2020 bond shall be substantially as follows. All blanks shall be filled and properly prior to delivery thereof. Just ask Attorney Otis, do I need to read this form here?
No, you do not.
I don't believe so. I was going to answer that for you.
A lot of blanks on it, right? All right, I'm going to skip past the form. I think that gets me to page 9.
Correct, at the last paragraph, or?
Yeah, last paragraph. In witness, where the city of the Port State of Indiana has caused this bond to be executed in the name of such city by the manual and facsimile signature of the mayor of said city, and attested by the manual and facsimile signature of the clerk treasurer of said city, and the seal of the city or a facsimile thereof to be affixed, engraved, and printed or otherwise reproduced thereon. End of ordinance.
Councilman Vincent, excellent, excellent, excellent. Great work, sir.
Thank you.
So are there discussion, or before we get to that, Eric Walsh, Baker Tilly, any brief comments?
Sure, I'll be very brief. So this is to refinance the 2012 general obligation bonds of the city. As I said earlier, interest rates are historically low. So this is very similar in terms of the grand scheme of things, in terms of like refinancing your home mortgage. You're just issuing a different bond at a lower interest rate to pay off the outstanding bond that's at a higher interest rate. Current estimated savings is $250,000 plus over the life of this bond that would be saved on interest.
So well worth hearing Councilman Vincent speak for that long. That's a nice savings. Any discussion? Hearing none, we will now move this ordinance to the November 2nd meeting. I have asked Eric, and I know he'll make it brief, from Baker Tilly, because we are bonding. I thought it'd be a great time just to share a brief overview that the city of LaPorte is in a good position regarding debt. And Eric, if you want to share with the council.
Sure, and I know it's been a long meeting, so I'll be brief. I'm happy to answer any further questions at a future meeting or after this meeting. I think the simplest way to answer that, Mayor, is one, taking a look at the overall city debt profile. That includes both utilities and city and redevelopment commission debt. Your most recent rating related to any of that was earlier this summer when you got a rating on the Newport Landing project bonds. You received a rating of A+ stable from S&P, and specifically to your the debt situation of the city, the rating or rationale was listed as adequate. And what that talked about or looks at is your debt load as a city compared to your revenues, expenditures, per capita, assessed value, many different factors. And it goes on a scale of really 1 to 5, and you really fall kind of right in the middle of that. So I wouldn't say that you're in perfect situation, but you're definitely nowhere near having any issues when it comes to your debt load and financial outlook compared to debt. I would also say S&P noted, and I think this is very important to where the city's going in the future, approximately 66% of the city's direct debt, so that's payable from tax or tax-related type funds on the city side, is scheduled to be repaid within the next 10 years. So that tells you that most of your debt is actually being paid off here in the near future, which is a very good position to be in, gives you flexibility going forward with other projects you may want to do.
Questions? Thank you. Mr. Otis, I think item 18 is being pulled off the agenda for this meeting.
That's correct.
So we will move on. And by the way, I just see our wonderful Annette Leffler walking in, and like to thank her for her long period of being here this evening and making sure everything is running smooth as our chief of staff. So Councilwoman West, introduction of an ordinance.
Your Honor, I move to introduce an ordinance for the first time in its entirety, amending ordinance 7-2016, new water and sewer connections outside of city limits.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor state by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Councilwoman West.
Ordinance amending ordinance number 7-2016, new water and sewer connections outside of city limits. Whereas the City of LaPorte administration, after due consideration, have recommended to the Common Council that certain amendments be made to the ordinance for connecting new water and sewer connections outside the city limits. Now therefore be ordained by the Common Council of the City of LaPorte that Section 1 under Section 7-2016 of the Municipal Code of the City of LaPorte is hereby amended and added as follows. On or after October 1st, 2020, any residential dwelling connecting to water or sewer utilities shall agree to be annexed by the City of LaPorte upon connection to the city's water, or sewage utilities. The residential dwelling cannot be presently annexed. The owner shall agree to execute an annexation waiver for the city of LaPorte. Section 2. In all other regards, ordinance 7-2016 shall be unchanged. Section 3. Any ordinance in conflict shall be repealed. And Section 4. This ordinance shall be in full force and effect from and after its passage, approval by the mayor, and publication as required by law. End of ordinance.
Thank you. Discussion, Nick Otis, if you want to share some brief thoughts on what we're doing here.
Yeah, Mayor, real quick. Right now, and I think looking at our council members, I think Councilman Galloway, Councilwoman Ficus, and probably Councilwoman Cutler as well were on the council at the time that this was originally passed. The city provides utilities to 39 North Conservancy District, the Pine Lake Conservancy District, and some other along 18th Street as well. The council passed an ordinance preventing any further expansion of those utilities. And they had really one exception to that, and that is residential customers who already had parcels along mains that were already built. The one addition we are adding here that the mayor requested was, it's not changing that at all. It just simply says if a resident is going to connect now outside the city limits, they're either going to be one, immediately annexed if they can be legally, and if they can't be legally annexed, they'll sign an annexation waiver. And that annexation waiver is good for a period of years. We record that annexation waiver, and when they become eligible to be annexed, we would annex them. So, for example, right now there's some parcels outside the city limits that are not contiguous to the city limits. They can't be annexed yet because they don't touch the city limits. When they touch the city limits, we will annex them.
Discussion? Hearing none, we will now move that ordinance to the November 2nd meeting. Other business.
Mayor, we did have a couple additional comments real quick. Going back up. We had two people, two different areas of town talking about some water issues. Pam Clark near Weller Avenue, an alley between Porter and Willow Ave, some runoff there. And then Monroe Manor, just what's the status on that? I don't know.
Well, I'll let Jerry and Tim mention, but Monroe Manor's been one. And if you noticed on our presentation, they were part of the 2021 Time to Do Work Now presentation. Jerry, if you want to start.
On Monroe Manor, we've got $3 million budgeted to finish that project. We did 40% of it in phase one, and this will complete it. I've got a lot of pressure from residents over to finish that project. They have drainage problems and really poor roads, and they drive through the completed portion every day on the way to their homes, and I'm not surprised they're putting pressure on us to finish the project. On the drainage problem on Willow and Porter, I've been out there. That's a relatively small project that we can get into the project list. It's already on my list of drainage problems. It's an additional street drain, and there's one handy. So that one is one that we can address.
And I would like to mention Monroe Manor's been on the thoughts of many of us getting that project finished. So we're excited and wanted to make sure that happens.
That's it from social media, Mayor.
I'm sorry?
That's it from social media.
Okay. Tim, did you have any comment there?
I think both those questions were for wastewater, Mayor.
Great. Any other business? I'd also like to thank Eric Walsh for your length of time tonight and for all your efforts leading up to this evening, and we'll look forward to having you back at Board of Works early tomorrow morning. With that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. We are adjourned. Thank you.